Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. While we wait for more people to join Zoom, we invite you to introduce yourself in the chat. So please share your name, organization, and why you're interested in joining the event with us today. We'll get started in just a few seconds. Awesome. Well, we are so thrilled to have you all here for today's discussion. On behalf of the Data Science for Everyone Coalition, welcome to Accessing AI, Bridging 21st Century Skills, bringing 21st Century Skills to your classroom. My name is Eric Drosta. I'm the Program Director for Data Science for Everyone. DS4E is a national initiative, coalition, and community based at the University of Chicago, and we're striving to catalyze the adoption of data science and data literacy as a basic component of K-12 education. We began our work under the leadership of economist and Freakonomics co-author Steve Levitt back in 2019, and has since grown to a national movement with 3,000 plus education leaders in many states and districts around the country. We currently work on 4 primary pillars: raising awareness, gathering, catalyzing classroom resources, community building, and policy relates to data science and technology education. We're at a really interesting moment in time when technology is developing faster than our system can keep up with. I'm sure you all have been hearing more and more about the rise of AI-based tools like ChatGPT. These shifts we're seeing are both exciting and can also be a bit daunting. I know that's especially true for the many school leaders and educators grappling with how to address student use of new technologies and navigate their role in the classroom. Just as these developments are shaping schools, they're also certainly impacting our day-to-day experiences, both at home and at work. And in this evolving landscape, it's becoming even more important that students need to be equipped with 21st century skills like data science, computing, and how to engage with AI algorithms. The question, of course, then becomes how can educators actually integrate student skill building into the classroom experience? We could talk about the definitions of these things for ages, yet we also know that in both in industry and practice, the lines are blurring between computing and AI and data science. And there are multiple paths for students to access AI and other critical technology learning. So we asked the panelists for tangible ideas for next week or for next semester, or what you could do in the classroom. I'm so thrilled to have a group of experts at the forefront of many conversations around AI education with us today to help highlight concrete approaches and how you can apply teaching and learning in these disciplines to your own classrooms. In just a moment, I'll pass the floor over to our moderator, Lexi Lonas, a reporter from The Hill, covering news and developments in education and education policy. We are also joined by Alex Kotran, the CEO and co-founder of the AI Education Project, Charlotte Dungan, the Director of Content and Development for TeachAI, a cross-sector effort between the World Economic Forum, ISTE, and many others, Krystal Chatman, an Equity Fellow at the Computer Science Teachers Association, and an instructional technology facilitator in the Jackson Public School District in Mississippi. And of course, last but not least, our own Mahmoud Harding, instructional design specialist here at DS4E. Before we get started, I would also like to remind everyone about the DS4E community standards. We welcome coalition members of all different backgrounds and levels of experience with data science education. To create room for a healthy and engaging debate, we've established a code of conduct that creates an environment of respect, inclusion, and effective communication. You can learn more about our community standards, including how to report any issues on our website. And we'll also drop a link in the chat now in case you need it. Without all that out of the way at the start here, I'll turn things over to our moderator, Lexi, to get us started with today's demos for classrooms.
Thanks so much, and I'm so happy to be here today. And I'm thrilled to hear from our speakers today. Before they introduce themselves, I just want you guys to know what we'll do today. Each panelist will lead a brief presentation of a lesson plan to show educators how they can bring AI into the classroom, and then we'll have a brief we'll have time for a brief Q&A at the end of the demonstrations, and I'll pull questions from submissions we already have, and also please feel free to ask questions in the chat throughout the event. Before we do that though, if each speaker could please say your name, where you work, and tell us tell us about the way you guys have started to use AI in your daily lives. And then I guess we'll have Krystal go first.
Hello, everyone. I am Krystal Chatman from Jackson, Mississippi in the Jackson Public School District, representing the Computer Science Teacher Association. Everyday life, I can't tell you when I don't use AI. I talk to my phone, I talk to my watch, I possibly talk to my computer. So it's a lot of personal use, especially. And so that's a segue that I use with students to get them interested in how they can make sure that, especially those of us in the South that have a very special way of saying things, talk to our devices, we actually are understood. So small ways like that is how I get kids interested more so in AI.
Awesome. Let's move on to Charlotte.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Dungan. I'm on the TeachAI Initiative. I do work for code.org, but in my role, I represent multiple organizations and consider myself a curator of resources from all of our partners that we work with. And for me, AI is exciting because it's embedded in the things that we use. So when we talk about how my new phone can autofocus in the dark and take pictures that we didn't used to be able to take, or that our maps can adapt to needing to travel by bicycle or by car, those are exciting applications that kids can use.
Great. Let's do Mahmoud next.
So my name is Mahmoud Harding. I work at Data Science for Everyone as an instructional designer. The way that I typically use AI on a daily basis is to help me do things like figure out a new recipe. Sometimes I try to trick it to make it think I like something that I don't really like, to see what it's going to recommend for me to do, just to kind of get a laugh for myself. I also use it a lot for directions, like using maps and things like that. Those are the daily personal uses of AI for myself.
And last but not least, Alex.
Hey everybody, I'm Alex Kotran. I'm co-founder and CEO of the AI Education Project. We build curriculum that advances AI literacy for students and teachers across the U.S. with a focus on middle school and high school. I just want to mirror what everybody else said. I think, Krystal, you made a really great, good encapsulation of all the ways that we've been using AI even before generative AI. When it comes to generative AI, I've been spending a lot of time trying to learn how to use it more day to day, and I've actually kind of run into some roadblocks. That it's probably most useful for me in terms of like writing grant proposals and reports. So far, I haven't really successfully used it for doing things like writing emails and other sort of strategic writing, but working on it, and then also creating art, mostly for fun, like my background.
Awesome, great. So I'm so excited to hear from you guys about how schools can make use of these tools you guys talked about in the classroom. So for these spotlights, we'll move in alphabetical order by last name. So we'll kick things off with Krystal, then move on to Charlotte, then Mahmoud, and Alex. And to our audience, please feel free to keep asking questions while the spotlights are going on, and we'll try to get to as many questions at the end during the Q&A. So first, we'll have Krystal go for her lesson.
All right. Hello again, everyone. Like I mentioned before, I'm Krystal Chatman, and I'm here representing the Computer Science Teacher Association. I'm an Equity Fellow alum, as well as the Jackson Public School District in Jackson, Mississippi. And so the lesson plan that I want to highlight, but also talk about important things to know as you're teaching it, is from AI for All. And it's a part of their open curriculum. So this means all the resources are available and accessible for everyone, which is really good. So this lesson plan specifically focuses on AI and ethics. And so this is, I think, a great lesson because the conversation about AI and ethics, specifically focusing on some of the challenges that using AI presents, is something that sometimes gets glossed over because everyone is not really sure how to approach it. You know, with this widespread use of AI being pretty new to a lot of educators, it's just not always clear how to address some of the more challenging and uncomfortable issues. And I think that this lesson does a really good job of it. Specifically, it focuses on identity and student-centric approaches to having this type of difficult conversation. So the students are able to like role play, which is always one of my favorite things to do. And they also run companies, so they're in charge of making ethical decisions after they research to figure out specifically what should and should not be done. So the lesson is here and available. I think it's great. Everyone should look at it. But one of the pushbacks I often get is with that discomfort of talking about equity in a classroom, especially sometimes in a climate where having conversations about equity or broadening participation isn't always welcome and supported. So I wanted to take some time to click on the right part, but talk about identity-centric instruction. So specifically, what is it? It's the pedagogical practices that allow us to welcome the full student into the classroom. And what I mean by that is, you know, we recognize that as individual people, there are multiple parts to us. You know, I am not just an educator, just as my students are not just here for academic purposes. And so when we're focusing on letting them explore and share their identity, they learn from themselves, they learn from each other, and it's a really great environment. And so the reason why this is specifically important is because when we're talking about complex types of topics in coursework, like data science, computer science, and artificial intelligence, it can be intimidating to students. And research has shown us multiple times that if students do not feel that they belong in a particular field of study, they generally don't seek advanced level coursework, and grades aren't necessarily as high and mastery is not as high as it could be. So focusing on making sure that the students feel that they are welcome and appreciated in a learning space, that they have an opportunity to bring their life experience, parts of their community, parts of their culture into the learning space, definitely helps a lot when it comes to getting through with some of these more complex learning things. And so when we're talking about identity-centered instruction, you kind of get it confused a little bit with student-centered because it's like, students, identity. Well, I always look at it like student-centered is a piece of the student's identity. So student-centered gave us a lot of great teaching strategies like differentiated instruction, project-based learning, choice and voice, flexible grouping, things that we know that are solid practices for instruction. But when we're talking about identity-centric lesson or pedagogical strategies, we're talking about that community connection that students like to share. We're talking about inclusive linguistic and cultural approaches. We're talking about intersectionality and that we're allowing every part of our student to show up in instruction. And so when we allow that to happen, I've never not been amazed by some of the perspectives that my students have brought into the classroom because we've cultivated a safe space for learning. So when you're going through this process of pushing towards this identity-centric instruction, it's a challenge when you're not as experienced or you don't have a lot of support from your leadership inside of the school. So that is a little bit frustrating. So I have 3 steps that kind of help. First, create a safe and judgment-free space. Make sure that it's an environment where all students feel safe. A wonderful educator said, and I think her video has gone viral every school year, that students need champions. And so we need to make sure that we are supporting them in that way so they feel safe sharing themselves in our rooms. And then, of course, approach this type of pedagogy as an opportunity to make those deeper connections with students. You know, one of the reasons we are here in the game is because we possibly really enjoy being around kids. And so fostering those deeper connections where we really get to know them and we really get to support them as they grow and develop is always great. And then finally, be comfortable with students taking the lead. It is a shift for a lot of us to take a back seat to the learning, you know, let them drive the metaphorical car, if you will, only if they have licenses, I guess. But it is always amazing to hear their perspective, what they think, what's important to them. And so identity-centric instruction allows for that. And so when we're talking about a couple other specific strategies, 21st century skill focus is always high, challenge-based learning, there's a link to that in the resources here, data dashboards. I always hear a lot of pushback about teaching students data science. And I'm like, well, you have to make it to where it makes sense to them. So push for identity-centric data science related activities. The quickest one I can think of is data dashboards. Let's say that we have a student that is a serious athlete, has been playing maybe basketball for like 10 years. That student, I'm positive, knows a lot about numbers and statistics, because you have to be able to know how well you can perform, how frequently you make a free throw. And so if we allow students to say, hey, let's do a data dashboard where we're talking about your success in the sport of your choice or in the facet of your life of your choice, that's how we loop them in and tie them in and help them make the connections between the concepts that we're learning in the classroom and how they can relate to the real world. And moving forward, of course, we know that kids like to document. Helping them to document their processes is another good way, as well as culturally responsive pedagogy. We know that. The last three things I want to mention are the approaches. And so student-led discussion is always amazing. Let them lead the conversation. Cross-curricular computational thinking. What's amazing about this video is it's a kindergartner. So she's 5 and she's telling you about science and math. And it's cute because she has a little 5-year-old voice. And then, of course, identity-centric environment. So it's one thing to create the emotional and social aspect of it, but it's another thing to make sure that the room, the space that you are occupying feels like you should be there. And so with all of that, I think that's the end. It is. Thank you for your time. Everyone that has a link, there's like a whole bunch of links here. I love giving resources. I find them and I just put them in slides. So there you go.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Krystal. That was a great presentation. We are now going to give the mic over to Charlotte.
Thanks, Krystal. I didn't see one of your resources that I love so much, so I want to share it as well. There's a book by Brian A. Brown called Science in the City, and it's a way to think about the language that you use to reach students so that they feel included. And if we're talking about identity-centric, I wanted to make sure I threw that in as well. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about TeachAI. And TeachAI is an initiative through, this is our website, and you can go there too, teachai.org. Rather than finding slides, you can follow along. The important thing to know is that this TeachAI is an initiative. It is not an organization. And so there are lots and lots of people involved. You can read about us and our values. But most importantly, we're going to talk about this guidance toolkit, because what it is a response that we've heard schools are struggling to know what to advise. What do we do about AI right now? And how do we move it into our classrooms? How do we talk about it with teachers or families? So this toolkit is interactive. That means everything is downloadable, it's usable right now, and it helps facilitate conversations about what we want for students in the future. So we might be talking about AI, we might be talking about data science or cybersecurity, but how do we talk about the ethics or the application of these things in our schools? So here's an example. If we apply 7 principles for AI in education, you'll see that these are the core of what we're trying to help schools do, which is use the AI tools that are available to help students achieve their educational goals. So that might mean that a student that has some learning differences can differentiate their learning, or a student who needs acceleration can have some personalized learning experiences to accelerate or deepen their learning. The point is that they have access and the ability and knowledge to use tools to achieve their goals. We also want to make sure that all of our AI tool usage is in compliance to existing policies to ensure that students have data privacy and security with their data, so that we're not, for example, putting their information into an LLM and giving that to a corporation where that data would typically be protected. A third thing is that we want to promote AI literacy very broadly, not just in the computer science classroom, although I think that's going to be important, but also across the curriculum, in our math, in our science, in our English language arts, hopefully in our arts as well. We want to realize the benefits of AI while addressing those risks, advancing academic integrity. That means that we're going to talk about and have conversations about how to use these technologies ethically, to have citation, for example, and to use them in a proper way so that we can deepen learning. And we always want to keep humans in the loop. That's principle number 6, where we're going to enhance teachers' abilities to connect with students. There's some really good research out right now that's showing that we can gain about 30% of teachers' time if we apply AI so that they can more directly interface with students. And then we need to continue to assess the impacts of AI in school systems, because we know that the technology is changing rapidly. And so we need to continue to look at that. So this guide will help you sort of walk through that. And I want to go back to some sample guidance as well. So there is a whole document here that would give you lots and lots of information, and it has examples. So as you go through and use these resources, you'll see that there are, like, here are the citation styles for each of the classroom usage that you might have, and you can see actual policies and take a look at them. We're not being prescriptive. You'll need to develop them in your own ecosystem about what would work for your system, but there's all kinds of links and resources that are available. And if you look up here at the very top, there's also something called a presentation on the menu. It's also on the main page if you're there. But this is a presentation where you can actually talk to your schools or to your constituents about AI. So you can download this, you can edit it, you can add your own slides, you can follow through and just get whatever you need from this. But it's a whole overview of what AI is, what we should do about it, and then like a bunch of statistics at the end. We've got benefits and risks, for example, and then you can look through it here, but you can also use the slides, and that's a resource that's like very quickly able to be implemented. We also have a parent letter. So if you're wanting to think about, this is just a sample, but these are the things we might want to talk with parents about. It might describe age restrictions for certain tools, or an expectation that students would produce original work. And then with that, we have a student agreement, which is a sample policy for how students should use AI responsibly in the classroom. And so this is a very simple example. You might have a longer version or a tailored version for each specific class, but it's at least a starting point to have a conversation about where AI should be used. So I welcome you to dig through this, find all the different resources. There's all kinds of different things here. But I also want to talk about the future of TeachAI in my last minute, and that is that this is the first of several resources that the initiative is developing. This one is about guidance for schools. The next one is about state and national level policies. Could potentially be in a regional level, but like, what policies should we enact to promote AI literacy? And then after that, we'll have guidance for computer science education specifically. And following that, we'll have AI literacy guidance, a framework, some exemplars, curriculum, and how do we change assessment as a result. And that's where I'm so excited to be working for with DS4E as a partner, because we know that data science is going to be a part of that conversation, and that we need to have some really clear alignment. Schools can't just keep adding subjects over and over. So we're going to make sure that they are able to integrate AI in computer science, data science, and computer science, but also the other way, that we're looking at our core subjects and making sure that these technologies are applied across the curriculum. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks so much. And now we're going to move on to Mahmoud, and he's going to present his bite-sized lesson on integrating AI.
All right, let's see if we can get this to go here. All right, this. All right, and I think we are good. All right. So my name is Mahmoud Harding again, and I work at Data Science for Everyone as an instructional designer. So my bite-sized lesson is not a lesson per se, but it's sort of a motivating speech to get people into the fold of working with data and using AI in their instruction in the classroom. And so here we have a scene from The Wizard of Oz. So if anyone grew up in the 80s, you know that this movie would come on a regular basis on Sunday night sometimes. And in my opinion, The Wizard is the first screen adaptation of generative AI. So he was asked by Dorothy and her friends a series of questions, and this generative AI, this wizard, was supposed to be able to help them answer, give them answers to their question. So when I think about what would someone in the classroom need to develop in order to provide this 21st century instruction, I hearken back to my time as a child looking at The Wizard of Oz. And so the thing that that comes to my mind first is you need to have curiosity, right? So what I would suggest and urge people to do is develop curiosity and implement it into your instruction. So demonstrate for your students what it means to be curious and be a learner. Then I will look for data, not just any data. I will look for occurrences of subject-related stories that use relevant data that can be integrated into my instruction. So for example, I listen to podcasts, I look at a lot of documentaries, I read books, I read magazine articles, and anywhere I stumble upon something that I think may have data that's relevant to my instruction, I think about ways to implement that into my learning activities. But when I do that, I'm leading with the questions. For example, I've taught courses in Introduction to R and Python, and we don't teach students all of R and all of Python. It would be impossible. But what we teach students how to do is, if you learn some of the basics and you have a need to learn other programming skills, how do you learn those skills? And so what I suggest is you always let the questions about the data dictate the tool that you're going to use to answer your question. So that might mean you need to use something like a spreadsheet. You can use like a Raspberry Pi, a data dashboard, or even some kind of particular programming language. But if you don't know that programming language, here, in my opinion, is the power of AI. You may not know how to program in Python, but ChatGPT does. You may need the power of Python to answer a question in your content area based on the data you have, but you don't have a need to learn the full library of the Python package that you're using. So understanding how to ask the questions for AI is going to be the skill that I think teachers that are in service and teachers who are in college now that are pre-service are going to have to develop. How do we learn how to have these conversations with generative AI in order to help us be more productive and answer questions that we have about any of the learning activities that we're engaging in with our students? So what I feel is an important aspect in classroom instruction is we need to use the mathematics and humanities along with computer science and data science to help us uncover what's behind the curtain of AI. So just like in The Wizard of Oz, the wizard was behind the curtain, no one knew what was going on, the dog ran, pulled the curtain back, and this is what we see. So then how can we help students understand what's actually happening with algorithms that do recommendation, machine learning, facial recognition systems, and all the other things that they utilize in their life and that they see have impacts on lives of others around them. And so what I've listed here, that I'm not going to go through all of them, is a list of different activities that speak to certain aspects of AI in connection with subject-specific material that a teacher might be teaching in a classroom. So here's a paper that was written, and these researchers had students invent data structures to model and classify whether a picture that was drawn by an elementary student, if the student was in the 2nd grade, the 3rd grade, or the 4th grade. And here's one snippet of the model that I guess Vera did. And what I want to highlight here is that this model is non-technical. So you don't always have to default to programming and technology when you're thinking about unmasking what AI does. We can also look at a full-on course. I was a part of developing a course at NCSSM that was based on the Data 8 course, another idea to help students understand how to use programming and computing to uncover what's happening with AI. In the link to my slides, I'm sharing with you a conversation that I had with ChatGPT with some students when we were doing a data science project. These students were new to programming, and so they had to wrangle a currency string to make it a number. So we went through some conversations with ChatGPT. We also want to expose students to things like the ethics. There's a lot of human work that's happening behind AI that I think students need to be aware of. And finally, we also want to have them touch on aspects of responsible uses of AI. And so these are things that I'd like to share, and I'm done. And the links to the slides are there.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks so much. And last, we are going to have Alex share his lesson and insights on AI.
Thanks, Lexi. Let me go ahead and share. So this is going to be, I think, by design, a really simple presentation. So if you go to our website, aiEDU.org, and you go to the teach bar, you'll see something called AI snapshots. And AI snapshots are probably almost certainly our most popular learning product that we have available. And that's because they are encompassing, and I'll show you the slide. So we have 180 of them. They're 5-minute warm-ups. So these are really quick hits, truly bite-sized per Lexi's call out. These bite-sized entrees to different topics of that touch artificial intelligence, or ways that artificial intelligence touches core subjects. What's important is that these warm-ups are aligned to English, science, and social studies. And the idea is that we wanted to lower the bar and make it as easy as possible for a classroom teacher to just like dip their toes in the water. What we found is that it's very hard to get teachers to commit to investing significant amounts of classroom time into teaching AI, especially because our model, aiEDU's model, is we are trying to augment technical learning about artificial intelligence with non-technical, standards-aligned lessons and activities that can be plugged into core content and core subject areas in a modular way. And so to get teachers started with that process, we have a bunch of different ways for them to get started. And I'm going to actually just walk you through a couple of my favorites. And I'm going to focus on English and social studies, because I think that's often where people assume that there might not be as many connection points. And that's one of the ways that we actually are often surprising and delighting folks. So this is actually, and it's interesting, we developed AI snapshots prior to language models and generative AI really blowing up. But I would say that it kind of demonstrates that these topics that are being discussed today were still around before. They're just more relevant and more sort of, I think, like front and center. So one of my favorite activities is it's a classroom debate, and the idea is, okay, so you can now use AI to generate like the realistic or really high quality covers to sci-fi novels. And the question is, like, what are the benefits and the harms? And the reason I like this activity is it really helps students to kind of wrap their heads around, who are the different stakeholders that stand to benefit or be harmed by this. And so you could imagine, a student who's, an aspiring writer saying, hey, like, this is going to make it easier than ever for me to publish a book. I don't have to have all this money up front to be able to hire an artist. It's going to actually potentially make it even more equitable because you aren't going to be it won't be required for you to have all of this capital to invest into getting something that would be high quality. And then obviously on the other side, you could imagine in the same class saying, hey, I'm an aspiring artist. This use of AI would directly hurt my ability to earn money. And I think that that is sort of like almost the crux of this debate about the use of AI to automate certain tasks in different industries. And by making this relatable, it creates an on-ramp for students to start to feel a sense of agency and to even contributing their own opinions to the topic. And so paired with each of these slides, we have some kind of guiding questions for teachers. And the idea is that we don't expect teachers to have any background in artificial intelligence. So they're coming into this, yes, they're facilitating these activities or debates or discussions, but we're giving them a lot of support so that they don't necessarily need to, spend time in advance really reading up on the topic. And you'll see sort of like these sort of like different prompts and the teachers can use to steer the conversation. Another one is around the use of AI and actually sort of like interpreting emotions and mental states from voice recordings or voice data. I think this is so important because if you're a student, there are companies today that are actually thinking about how can we implement more surveillance to monitor students. And again, this is an activity that simplifies it into a level that any English class could plausibly have strong opinions about. And again, it gets students to think about what are the different variants and types of data that AI can use. And so it's not just numbers or spreadsheets, but even voice or mental states or sympathies. I'm not going to walk through all of these, but again, just different ways for teachers to kind of steer the conversation. Okay, so moving to social studies, this is really interesting, right? So this is an example of where we can use these bite-sized, the model of these like really small quick hit activities to help teachers keep their class time relevant and current. And so you could definitely imagine a teacher, if they're teaching about the Cold War, talking about the ways that our current conflict, the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine, surface some of those same questions. And then there's this there's this socio-technical component of what does it mean to actually ban people from seeing certain content. And this is really like very, very important today because there are lots of countries that are implementing bans like this. And it also helps, I think like if I was a social studies, I'd be pushing my students to think about, are there other ways that we inadvertently allow ourselves, even in the US, to not see certain types of content, and what might the risks of that be? And then my last one is on the use of AI-powered, automated decision-making. And these are topics that no doubt other folks that are on this call have been engaging with in the realm of policy and regulatory discussions. We're bringing this into the classroom, and really I think like at the highest level, right? It's like what is the level of transparency that we should expect when automated decision systems are being used by governments. When we talk to social studies teachers, this is totally a topic that they feel confident at least facilitating a discussion or a debate on. And that's what I would leave you with is, I think that there are different layers or levels to AI literacy, and where we are really thinking about aiEDU's contributions to the broader gamut of AI literacy and AI readiness. It's really, what does that entry point look like, or like the very top of the funnel, and can we create this spark of curiosity or excitement for students? And and here we have a project dashboard, and we have a lot of other learning products that teachers can access, and you can just go to our website to find those. But Lexi, I'll turn it over back to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, and thank you all for your insightful presentations today. We're going to move on to our Q&A portion of this. I'm going to ask a question call on one of you, but once that person's done, if anybody else has any other thoughts on that particular question, please feel free to jump in. So the first question we have here from the audience is, how do we prepare teachers to adequately teach ethical AI use? And Krystal, I think I'm going to start that one off with you.
Outside of some of the things I already mentioned, as far as the identity-centric pedagogy, I would say let's start with the basics: digital literacy, digital citizenship, because that kind of helps a lot with the concerns about plagiarism and academic dishonesty, if we're talking about how to properly cite sources and do things of that nature. So that's my starting point when it comes to helping focus on how to ethically use AI in the classroom.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any other thoughts before we move on to the next question?
I think one of the main issues with preparing teachers for instruction is, I think there needs to be a two-pronged approach. So we have to have professional development for teachers who are already in the field to get them up to speed, but we also need to make sure that we're empowering students at the university level who are becoming teachers to be very comfortable with those tools. So when they meet one another in the classroom, the student who may be more adept with using technology can meet a teacher who is learning technology, but now the teacher who is learning technology has classroom experience to share with the teacher who's new to the classroom. And I think those can foster great mentorships, which I think could increase the chances of teachers staying around in the classroom after that first year.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So this next question I really like, which is how do we structure the introduction of relevant AI, data science, and other relevant topics in meaningful ways that are not just superficial descriptions of the technology. And Alex, I'd like to throw that one to you first.
So I think this is actually like a really important question that's worth stepping back and considering, which is, what does the future of AI literacy actually look like? And I think, when we started aiEDU 4.5 years ago, we might have envisioned, and we did envision this idea of like an AI 101 class that every student takes. And you could imagine that being, part of your freshman or sophomore year. I think with the explosion of generative AI language models and seeing how fast even the user interfaces are changing and how accessible they are, it feels like this actually looks more like the internet. And so we don't really have a class called Introduction to the Internet. You might cover the internet in a digital citizenship or digital literacy class, but it's something that's embedded into learning experiences across, across the school day. And I think that's probably what at least the sort of like the top of the funnel again, that where we're focused, what that looks like is, how can we connect AI with all of these moments where it's actually relevant to other things that the students are learning? And then from that, I think, continue to go deeper. I agree that it needs to be more than surface level, but to me, what that means is it needs to feel really, truly relevant and practical, and not just, talking about what the definitions are, because, now that we can get hands-on, I think we need to move away from just, talking at students and really showing them how.
Alex, that's what I was going to say, is moving beyond that, talking at them. And what that looks like in practice is experiences that align to what teachers are already teaching, and they need to learn how to do that. But it also means that students can envision their future careers or their future lives using these technologies with people sharing what that means in the field. So careers are shifting quite a bit, and the future of work is starting to look different than it might have been. And so the more that we can put examples in front of students who may not have that exposure at home or in their communities, so that they know what's possible, it gives the why. It says why we should learn these things in this perhaps new way.
Awesome. So the next question is, how can teachers generate school district and administrative buy-in to support the integration of 21st century tools and skills? And Mahmoud, if you could start us off with this one.
So in order to do this, we need people to demonstrate what classroom instruction looks like so that administrators can see how students will be engaged during the process of learning with the inclusion of these tools and different data science techniques. And so one of the things that I've done in the past is I've worked with teachers from my home high school in Oxford, North Carolina, and working together with those teachers and having students experience some data-driven lessons, and then having those students take trips to community colleges and go to universities, and the principals seeing how much excitement was around that, then that opened the door for even more acceptance for integrating these kinds of tools and techniques into the classroom. And when you're dealing with administrators and school district people, things are really driven by the standards. So our focus a lot at DS4E is to try to show people how you can teach the same standard, you can teach the same content, but let's do it in a different way.
Mahmoud, I agree
sorry.
with you 1000%. That's one of the, I have like a two-pronged approach, and that's one of them, making sure that I can tie it back to the standards, to the accountability measurements, to make sure that, you know, the main thing is still the main thing when it comes to how administrators think. The second thing that I would also suggest is to actually get them actively using tools. There are platforms that are specifically for educators that help with prompting. So instead of having the blank chat GPT screen, you just kind of type the information you need and choose a couple of drop down things, and it gives you a response. And so I've helped kind of push back some of that fear of using AI and, you know, is it dangerous? Is it the Terminator type questions by having them actively go in a workshop with me and, you know, hold their hands, it's okay. And we work through using the tools for lesson planning, specifically. That's where we always start. Parent communication, the things that, you know, have to happen often and frequently, but also kind of feel like a lot on the to-do list. And so that is another way I would suggest to kind of get that buy-in, just get them hands-on using it.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too and say, fear is the motivator. And I had a district superintendent tell me that once, that he motivated his constituents by making them afraid, and not just about technology, but about larger community concerns. Like, my rural students are leaving and not coming back. And that's because the jobs aren't available there, or they weren't sure how to get enough farmers in their region, that kind of thing. So when you address the fears that superintendents may have, my students are falling behind in testing, and you use that as a solution, then you can address their concerns, and that creates buy-in.
Awesome. So our next question is, how are you as leaders in AI, data science and computer science working together to integrate these skills and demonstrate how they intersect? And Charlotte, if you could kick us off with that one.
Sure. So TeachAI is sort of an integrator. I'm a curator, not a writer. And so as an initiative, one of the things that is really important is that we listen to each other, and not be way up here, but actually like talk to students, to teachers, to administrators, and to organizations, so that we're all in alignment. It's funny how I know, you know, people on this call, because we do live in this ecosystem. I guess that's the most important thing, is to keep having conversations, and for leaders like yourselves in schools, find people like you that have solved the same types of problems that you're facing. And one of the recommendations is to find a peer and, you know, go through this together. Don't be the only candle in the wilderness, but like recognize the folks around you are well equipped to support you.
Yeah, and then Krystal, I would love to also get your thoughts on this one after your extensive resource list and stuff. It seems like you're pretty good at sharing your insights with others there.
I really don't have much to add to what Charlotte said. It's just a matter of, keeping the communication line strong. I've been fortunate enough to work with researchers as well. And so we've kind of realized there's a slight gap between what's happening in all of these great labs and what's happening in the classroom. So we're saying, okay, well, let's figure out the connection. Let's work to make sure that what you guys are developing and spending all of this hard-earned grant money on actually translates to something that we can use consistently in the classroom. So it's building those bridges and making sure that those lines of communication are going both ways, I think is the best way to make sure that we can continue to build things that work.
Great. Thanks so much. Our next question is what are your guys' recommendations for giving teachers the ability to create or modify content that uses AI? And Alex, we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, create or modified content. So we're talking about using, let's say, a language model to take a lesson plan and, let's say, level it up or level down based on reading ability. I think that the baseline here is teachers need to understand what safe and responsible use actually entails. So I think at a minimum, there is professional learning that needs to happen for teachers. And this is not just about empowering them to be more efficient or effective, but it's also almost like a multifaceted set of learnings that apply to a wide variety of tools. And ultimately, like having that check of like, is there the potential for bias to be introduced if I use this tool in a certain way? And like, I think for me that is, you could use ChatGPT to automate grading, but you also should have a plan to mitigate any potential biases that might emerge from something like that. And then I think ultimately that this is not just a one and done. This is actually sort of an ongoing project. So you have to actually, I don't know if it's quarterly or semi-annually or monthly, but there needs to be sort of these regular touch points of like, here are some of the newest tools, here's how to use them really effectively. Here are the safety considerations that we have in place. I think the work that TeachAI is doing will help us get past some of that, because eventually we will have these really clear policies and procurement standards, and there will be tools that meet those acceptable use policy requirements. And so we can be a little bit less cautious, but currently today we're in the Wild West. And so teachers need to be on their guard.
That sounds good. Is there, I guess with being on guard, like you said, how difficult, I guess, is it for because if teachers have to be on guard, I feel like they might be a little bit more hesitant with all of this. How do you kind of balance that? Hey, you should really be on guard with also like you really need to try. You really want to try to learn how to you use this and take the time to study it.
So I can just answer that briefly, but I'm curious if anybody else on the panel has a response. So I don't think that we need to be rushing to get teachers to be using AI in the classroom as quickly as possible. I think that we should be taking the opportunity now to be the learning process and learning journey. There's just there isn't even, even from a cost perspective, necessarily have a plan to ensure that there's to a lot of these tools. And yes, many of them are free, but there's examples of these free tools suddenly no longer being. If I was a superintendent, I would be focused on how do we build broad-based AI literacy, an understanding of what language models and generative AI tools are, helping them connect, identify specific use cases to dip their toes in the water, but I wholesale trying to get every single teacher to be creating all of their lessons GPT. And so, maybe any might change. And so the question is simply like, what are the steps that need to happen over the next, let's say 12 to 18 months to make sure that we're doing this in a really sort of measured way that anchors on keeping a teacher in the loop, focusing on professionalizing the profession, and really, underscoring the importance of privacy, equity, and mitigating bias.
Great. So then I'm going to move on to our we are going to wrap up here, so I'm going to give the floor back to Zarek.
Awesome. And Lexi, thank you so much. And thank you for our wonderful panel for sharing such useful tips on how to leverage 21st century skills and technologies to build rich opportunities for students about the different subject areas. I would also want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I think our role at DS4E ultimately is to aggregate and amplify so many emerging resources on these topics. So you as a classroom educator, or you as a school or district administrator, don't have to respond to the tidal wave of tech tools alone, and have tips and tricks to engage on these topics when there are few out there. Many support organizations, included the ones featured today, are building example lesson plans, curriculum, messaging guidance to help meet the moment thoughtfully. And we hope this provides a quick snapshot of a few resources and approaches that are already available today that can be used in the classroom next semester or even next week if you need it. We clearly need way more time on these topics. I want to encourage everyone to keep the conversation going with other members of the Data Science for Everyone community. Ways to do that are I'm going to quickly plug our Slack, newsletter, LinkedIn, Twitter. And there really just anyone in the panel, I think, would be so excited to partner with you and to help you navigate these new waters. You also may have read recently that in order to help motivate some national support of this work, we have been doing some advocacy work on the Hill with members of the DS3 community. And we were able to engage last month in DC during the NCTM conference. We're excited to share that just yesterday, we held a Senate briefing to raise more awareness about the importance of data science and AI education. And we're thrilled with the success of these recent efforts and can't wait to keep the advocacy work going with hopefully some exciting news to share out soon. So please make sure to check out our newsletter for updates on all this exciting work. If you requested a certificate of completion, one will be emailed to you in the coming days. And well, today marks our last event of 2023. We're looking forward to an exciting calendar of dialogues and opportunities to engage with the community in the new year. So I'm so excited to see you all for our next virtual event in 2024, and hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much again for joining us.